me trying to make up with Donald Trump because they had a bit of a rift.
Yes.
We also have with us here the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt. Jonathan, you came from this address. You were in the hall in the House chamber. What was your impression of the speech, knowing that he had multiple audiences there?
Yeah, it was pretty extraordinary, Deanna. I mean, to be there in the chamber, watching Prime Minister Netanyahu deliver those remarks, there were a few things that stood out for me. Number one, it was a unity message. Like literally you had Democrats and Republicans standing up and applauding. You know, I thought there was going to be lots of empty seats. There simply weren't. It was a pretty full House. And he complimented President Biden and praised him, as Jamie said, and he complimented President Trump for the Abraham Accords. So he was sort of finding a way to praise both sides. That's number one. Number two, he talked about anti-Semitism. He talked about what's happening on our college campuses and what's happening in the streets, and how that is not just about protesting policies of the government. You're seeing people going after Zionists and Jews. And literally, while he was speaking, outside the Capitol, you had people burning American flags in front of Union Station. I saw signs as I came over here to the studio, people saying things like, any resistance is justified. I mean, comparing that kind of language, when you think about the babies who were burned and the women who were raped. So he talked about that. That was important. And then thirdly, I think he laid out a path forward. He talked about hostages and the needs to get them home. Then he talked about what a future could look like for Israel and a demilitarized Gaza, like a vision of peace. That to me was really quite welcome.
But there were a lot of dozens of Democrats boycotted the speech, didn't show up. A lot of those seats where the Democrats would have been seated were congressional staffers just showing up and sitting there.
You know, there may have been some empties, but I watched Hakeem Jeffries stand and applaud. I watched Chuck Schumer stand and applaud. I watched almost every Democratic senator stand and applaud. So I hear what you're saying, but I got to say, I saw unity in that room. I saw him try to appeal to both sides, and I saw people from both parties respond.
What you do at the ADL is try to stamp out hate.
Of course.
Anti-Semitism, hate against Islamophobia, Islamophobia, racism, all of it. How do you think that Netanyahu's attempt to do that in his speech is going to play? I mean, I was getting a text from one American Jew who said, okay, it's fine to call people useful idiots, but how about like a slight nod to people who are genuinely upset about the what's happening in Gaza?
Well,
and understanding that you're also seeing the signs that you just described, which is just plain hate.
And he talked about the Director of National Intelligence acknowledging a few weeks ago that Iran is involved in these protests, something we've been seeing at ADL for a long time. But he did something very interesting, Deanna. Before the speech really got started, he called out some of the folks that he had brought over as part of his delegation, including, for example, a Bedouin soldier, which was interesting because I think most Americans don't realize there are Israeli Muslims in the IDF. And then he had an Ethiopian Israeli soldier who ran 8 miles on October the 7th. So I point this out because he demonstrated the diversity of Israeli society. And I think you pointed this out earlier in a way that surprised a lot of people. He could have come with just decorated Jewish veterans. He didn't do that. He brought a more diverse delegation, and I think that sends a message.
I just, to push back just a little bit about all the unity, you know, several Israelis from both sides of the aisle were texting me during the speech. And what I heard from them is that was, in effect, a very celebratory speech that really does not fit, and that there is an alternate reality on the ground that's going on both in Gaza and in Israel.
Right.
As we know, in the north, 60,000 plus Israelis are displaced. There has been an extraordinary impact on the economy. And then, of course, there is the devastating reality of the number of deaths in Gaza, Palestinians, the humanitarian disaster. So he had a welcome audience there today, but he did ignore what I'm hearing from Israelis is a very dire reality on the ground.
Look, there is no question that is an incredibly difficult situation. And every civilian life lost is a tragedy. Every Palestinian woman or child who is killed inadvertently, no matter what the IDF tries to do, that is a tragedy. We should mourn every one of those deaths. But he talked about, for example, the dire situation in Gaza and how they're trying to bring in supplies. He talked about the situation in the north, like you're pointing out, and the need to bring those people back to their homes, 60 or 80,000 Israelis. And he talked about the need to bring the hostages home. I know at ADL, again, we're focused on fighting hate here at home, but we all wear the dog tags because we want these civilians, these innocent people back, including, by the way, dozens of Americans. I think, maybe it's 8 Americans at this point. So I think he tried to address that, Jamie, but look, if you've lost a child, I think about my friends, the Polans. I was with the Nurchos before we came on. Their sons are both held in Gaza. I can't even begin to grasp the unspeakable pain they deal with every day. We have got to get those kids home. So I hope they get a deal very fast so we can see Omer and we can see Hirsch back home safe and sound, and all the hostages once and for all.
Let's hope there's a deal that will bring those hostages home as quickly as possible. Jonathan Greenblatt.